Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the podcast where we take a look at movies from our past and ask the age-old question of, is that any good? Today, I had the privilege of choosing the movie, and I got to choose, I decided to choose the movie Pleasantville, which is actually an older movie than I thought. Is that a weird thing to say? Like, if you'd have asked me prior to, choosing it and, doing the basic Googling I tend to do for these for these podcasts, I would have guessed it was like 2001, 2002. But no, this is 1998. And boy, howdy, does Tobey Maguire's hair know it.
I think there's a certain thing with films of this era, though, isn't there, where sometimes a movie's release date, pre-internet, pre-downloading, streaming, all the rest of it, sometimes a movie would come out like 6 months to a year later in the UK, let alone like when it got a video or DVD release. So, I've looked at movies before for this and been like, but that's definitely not when I saw it, and realised that, I probably, by the time if I saw it on video, you've got to add potentially a year to 18 months. So I think maybe you might have seen it in early 2000s, you know what I mean?
Almost certainly, because when you do the math, I mean, the movie comes out in 98. I'm 11 when this movie comes out. There is no way 11-year-old Dan wanted to see this movie, cared about this movie, was interested in this movie. Zero chance. And I'm even more confident of that by the fact that when I finally saw the movie, it was on TV. And that's got to be like, that's at least 2 years later, right? Like, movies didn't go to TV very quickly back in the day. By the time it was on TV, it was a couple years old. So the absolute earliest I could have seen this movie is like 2000, 2001, I think. But yeah, we usually start this podcast with history, and I don't have an extensive one. Just the channel surfing. The movie was starting as I flicked to the channel. I thought, what's this? The intro is kind of interesting because it starts with that weird sort of trailer for the Pleasantville TV show, and I was kind of like, okay, this is mildly interesting. And then you just sort of get pulled in because the movie's opening act is pretty good at getting you into what's going on quickly, so it sort of drew me in on that sense. And then I just, really, really liked the movie. And it's one of those movies that I had a big gap in viewing, and I've spent the remaining years just terrified it's not as good as I remember it. It's a perfect movie for this podcast. Sorry, do you have a question?
Well, my assumption was that Maguire drew you in, because if it comes out in 98...
I thought about that.
It's probably not on TV till 2000, 2001,
right.
In which case Spider-Man is either just round the corner or, Spider-Man's 2002. So I wondered if it was... if you were channel hopping and went, oh, Spider-Man, okay.
Yeah, because it's also plausible I didn't see it until, much later, like, 2003, 2004. That's also possible. I have no memory of which age I was when I saw this movie, and we lived in the same house throughout from the age of like 11 or 12 until I left home. I lived in the same house. So there's almost, no way for me to specifically pin down the year I saw this movie. I was channel surfing, I found this movie, something drew me in. It is absolutely plausible that I didn't see it until 2003, 2004, and it was Spider-Man. Almost, that I'd say that's as likely as anything else, to be honest with you, if not more. But I would also say, to give the movie its credit, I do also think, regardless of who was playing that character, there's a really strong chance I'd have been drawn in by the movie, because it's such an... we'll get into full reviews later, but I don't think, even if you didn't end up liking this film on your, I think first time watching it this time, I think you'd be hard pressed to not agree that it's an interesting setup for a movie, and they do get to what you want to be looking at pretty quickly. The movie doesn't fuck about, basically. They get to the sort of meat and potatoes of it in quite good time. So if you're the sort of person that might be interested in this plot, you're going to get pulled in pretty quickly, I reckon.
Yeah, although the age we were, the movie comes on at the wrong point, and you might unfortunately an 11, 12-year-old might go, a black and white movie, nah, and skip
also
ahead,
true.
not
Yes,
realising.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. But that's why another reason I'm so confident I didn't see this at any time close to its release. I must have seen this much later. If I was really gonna put like a gun to my head, I honestly think probably actually you're right. The Spider-Man thing, probably 2003, 2004 would be my best guess. But anyway, so that's my history with the film. I really really enjoyed it. Young me thought it was a very clever film, and as I grew older, I became aware that the movie was, from memory, I became aware the movie was quite on the nose and not very subtle. And that made me fearful that it wasn't good. And therefore, I avoided it and haven't gone back to it in a long time. Because I just had this like really nice memory of watching this film, really enjoying it, and being very scared that the stuff I thought was clever, I only thought was clever because I was a fucking idiot child. And actually rewatching it, it's all going to be really cheesy on the nose nonsense, and it's not going to work at all. Which I'm not giving away yet if which way I went. But that was definitely the reason I've not watched this film in a very long time. So for you, this is like was a brand new experience, right? Like you picked up the remote yesterday and stuck this on for the first time like ever. Like did you? I think we did this last week. You didn't even know the premise, did you? Because I think you gave a guess, and I think it was quite far off. I was it was
very wrong.
Politely amused because it was a really good guess from what I could imagine you might have seen of the movie. I thought you crafted a really logical premise for a film based on snippets you might have seen. I don't remember what it was exactly now, but I remember being mildly impressed. But it was definitely wrong.
Well, it was basically I don't know if you've seen this movie. I think I will. I probably will avoid it. You know, it's not going to be my next pick, but at some point I will be picking this movie. I don't know if you've ever seen Brendan Fraser's Blast from the Past,
yes,
but I guessed that, like, and I knew that. I acknowledged that movie. I was like, I think it's like this, is it? Maybe. Obviously, it's not at all. But yeah, there was a logic to the guess and maybe a confusion of those two movies. I remember really enjoying Blast from the Past.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a movie I also really enjoyed, but never went back to. But I just think, I'll be honest with you, with Blast of the Past, I just think I kind of like just didn't feel the need to, which is maybe suggestive of it not being quite as compelling, because like I it wasn't like every handful of years I thought, I should watch that again. I went, no, it's going to be bad. I'm going to be sad. I think Blast from the Past I like watched it and then immediately forgot it existed.
I think Blast from the Past is exactly what you're describing, the reason you didn't watch Pleasantville. It's like, and I imagine, not to make assumptions on your opinion on Pleasantville, but I imagine Blast from the Past will go the way a bit more. But we will do that at some point.
Yeah, I would like to watch that movie again. I remember enough from it to know that it was certainly, there were fun parts to it. Whether the movie works, I don't know. But yeah, it was a good time. I certainly enjoyed it as a kid, for sure.
First movie I ever watched on DVD. There you go. There's a tidbit for you. Anyway,
mine was the Blair Witch Project, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Blimey. And if anyone's thinking, oh, great, they're tangenting already, I suppose we're tangenting because I have no history with Pleasantville.
Yes. Yeah. So where do we want to start with this? Do we want me to... Shall I go into thoughts first? Do you want to tell me your experience watching it for the first time? How do we want to... Where do we want to start?
I often think in a situation like this, actually, the more intriguing point of view is yours, is the person that's revisiting. So let's hear from yourself a little. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll set up what the movie is, and then you give your thoughts.
Sure.
So the movie is about two teenagers in modern day America, as it was at the time. Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon. So it's a pre Spider-Man Tobey, a pre Legally Blonde Witherspoon, Reese, and so they are brother and sister. He's a bit more introvert and really loves this show, Pleasantville. She's a bit more out there. And then they basically get sucked into the television show, which is a black and white television show called Pleasantville, about the it's sort of that that thing that shows, I guess I've never seen, but I make the assumption that it's shows like Leave It to Beaver and stuff like that. These sort of old black and white shows that paint the 1950s as this idyllic time, ignoring a lot of the problems that the era has. So it's all very mum and pop and it never rains and all that kind of stuff. And basically, these two modern teenagers, at first her, but then him as well, begin to have an impact on the world and begin to change it, and that change is represented in the colorization of the world. Suddenly, color and openness spread across the world, and essentially, the movie deals with how people react to that. It's fundamentally about repression and how change brings out social change, and therefore also in some quarters fear of social change, and reaction to that, and oppression and stuff like that. So that is an overview of the movie. We will avoid going further for spoilers, but essentially that is the plot and the themes. Dan, over to you know what I get. You know, we have a running bit on Nothing But Static where I never open the Wikipedia for a show that I'm teeing up and introducing, and I always fumble it. I haven't got anything open for this movie, and I think that was one of my best descriptions yet, which I think says a lot about whether the movie stuck with me.
Yes,
guess,
actually, that's a fair point.
Anyway.
Yeah, good point. Yes. So for anyone who's new to the podcast, who's just stumbled across it for this, I doubt this is someone's first version of this podcast, but just in case it is, the way we generally speak it, we try to keep it spoiler-free for like the first, chunk of the review, where we talk more general thoughts, and then we get into the nitty-gritty and start talking about specific scenes and ideas and things like that. So that's, if you're wondering why Chris was...
Yeah, we tend to get to whether we would recommend the movie, and once we've said whether we would recommend watch it or not, we then go spoilering, because that is a jumping off point for someone to watch the movie. Precisely. If they're interested.
Yeah. We there was a period of time where we stopped doing that, like, because we just forgot that was part of the structure of this podcast. There was like a whole series where we just didn't do that for some reason, but that is generally speaking how we've done it. Pleasantville. So I was, I'll say this now. I am delighted to report back that it wasn't a catastrophe of any kind. I had a really good time rewatching this film. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm just going to say outright, I really, really enjoyed myself. I was actually really worried about the circumstances under which I had to watch the film. I was, to say exhausted when I sat down to watch this film would be an understatement. It has been a very busy week for me, and I was deeply concerned. I'd been dozing in my seat minutes before and was worried I was just going to have to not watch the film then and squeeze it in some other time somehow in bits or something between watching it for me last night and this recording today. But luckily, once the film went on, I was immediately engaged. I was pulled straight in. I was deeply awake. And for most of the runtime, I was smiling basically ear to ear. I thought it was a delight to watch. Now, it is flawed. I think the politest way to say it might be to say third act problems. It's got some messy and complicated story choices that sort of prevent it from fully realizing its potential, especially in terms of landing its message. But my God, it was an absolute... Well, first of all, it's fucking hilarious. This movie is so funny. Oh, I did a little whistle on the S then. So funny. I can't even recreate the noise I just made as I said so. I was the beaver from Lady and the Tramp all of a sudden. But yeah, the movie's hilarious. It's one of the funniest movies we've seen on this podcast in a long time. But also it's like super, super entertaining. But also, I do think it does have some genuine, deep, and interesting commentary about the civil rights movement, second wave feminism, all of this stuff. It is on the nose, but it's complex enough that doesn't feel like too much of a problem, because it's all sort of muddied in with to a bigger, wider idea about progression and change, and there are all these different things that might be improved in someone's life if they adopt a more progressive viewpoint, and if the world adopted a more progressive viewpoint where people could just be themselves. That improves the lives of many different groups. So the movie, heavily leans in the civil rights movement and the second wave feminist movement, because those were the ones that were next in line after the 50s, if that makes sense. Like, these are the things that changed following the sort of, the point in which this show within the movie is set. But, this movie comes out today and it's about today's issues. but it's not different because we're still facing the same issue. The imagery, the points of reference for expressing some of that stuff would be different, but the message would be exactly the same. And it's kind of amazing how much that makes this movie feel timeless. So if we're just doing overall thoughts, I thought the cast are amazing. I thought it was beautifully shot. We'll talk about the visuals more later. It's interesting to look at, a really, really interesting story. I do think its third act lets it down in some ways, which we'll talk about, but not enough to negate the absolute joy that this movie brought me at multiple points of my evening yesterday. So yeah, I had a really good time with it, and I'm definitely going to be recommending. In a weird way, this is one of the first times we've done a movie where the quality versus its reputation, it seems crazy to me that this movie isn't more famous. Like this isn't like a movie people talk about a lot. Breaks my brain slightly, actually. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the movie. How about you, Chris?
I loved it. I won't bury the lead either. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was so engaging. It drew you in. I thought the performances were wonderful. The visuals were fantastic. I wrestled a bit during and after with some of the similar things. I think they showcase themselves in my mind in different ways, but I think at the heart of it is similar things you butted up against. In that I was kind of like, it felt like the movie was trying to do an awful lot. Like, there was you could watch this film and come away and go, oh, it's about feminism, and you can go, oh, it's about racism, and you could come away and go, oh, it's about sexual revolution, and all of these sort of things. And then there's religious iconography and imagery thrown in as well. And I kind of was a bit like, oh, is it trying to do too much thematically? And is it therefore... is it confused? And I ultimately came to the conclusion, and obviously we'll talk more about this with spoiler talk, I ultimately came to the conclusion that it is fundamentally dealing, as you said, with one wider theme and all the different ways that can present itself. And that wider theme is repression and societal change and fear of change. Like that is and how people react to that. That is the fundamental theme of this movie. And it's almost like because it's a TV show and because it's two modern kids that have been put in a TV show, it's almost like it makes the movie speed through different periods of American history, like in the space of a week.
100%. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah, and you have the things I've referenced. You have sexual revolution. You have racism, feminism, etc. So I came to the conclusion: no, the movie's not doing too much. It's in heightened world, and it is exploring all the different ways that its core theme presents itself. I, like you, think it is an absolute shame. Like, I didn't watch any because I didn't want to, affect my view before the review. But I search it on YouTube, wondering if I'm going to see hundreds of video essays, and I can see like 2 or 3. So like, there's some audience. But it's kind of astonishing the movie hasn't got a bit of a cult following, and it's mad how relevant. Unfortunately, it's a real fucking shame how relevant the movie feels. And in some ways, it's almost not the movie to watch at the moment because you'd just be like, fucking hell, we're still here. But I think it's phenomenal, and especially considering the cast. You've got often movies, if they've got one person pre their big break, you sort of, the movie will often be pulled up and talked about because of that. But it's not before his big break. But you've got Jeff Daniels in here, and then you've got Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon, like in early roles.
Yeah.
Everything else is specifics, but fundamentally, I had a brilliant time watching this movie, and would absolutely, thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. Pleasantly surprised. Ha ha ha! He did the thing. He named the movie. No, I think I was relieved. I think actually might be the real word. But like how quickly this movie brought a smile to my face, and how quickly this movie made me feel like I was so thoroughly engaged and so entertained. And look, I don't want to keep kicking a horse while it's down, but when you look at some of the movies we've covered this year, I mean, I think particularly Getting Even with Dad was a slog is a word. You know, the relief I felt that I was so like, because sitting down to watch a movie tired is not a good idea, and it's definitely not a good idea if you're going to review it. And if I'd had any other option, I would have taken it, right? I wouldn't have put this movie on in those circumstances unless I was really strapped for options in terms of when to watch it. But just an absolute credit to, I mean, God knows how I'd have come away from the movie if I'd have been in a good spirits, good high energy. God, I'd have been bouncing off the fucking walls, like. It's because it was joyous. It was genuinely joyous, and it clearly crafted with a lot of love, and a lot of thought. So yeah, we're recommending. We'll probably just sort of leave that as the spoiler-free section, because everything I want to talk about now is like getting into the nitty-gritty.
The weeds.
Getting into the weeds in Pleasantville, which are green now because change has happened and we've accepted it. Let's start with the big thing. Let's start with the big thing that's like, I think gonna. Let's go, mostly to sort of get it out of the way. But the movies are not just about progressive politics. It is primarily, I think, about the reaction to change, the reaction to progression. And I think the way it characterizes the people who fear change, they don't like it, and the reasons they might rail against it is really interesting. It's, how do I explain? It's like, it's ahead of its time in some ways, but obviously this is something that's always happened. Progress has always been met by these kinds of people. Hostile people who either yearn for an imagined sort of better time in the past that is just, they can never quite place exactly when that was. And they yearn for inequality sometimes too, because they benefited from it. And in this movie, it's represented by the men of Pleasantville, who very hilariously are now scared of getting home, saying, "Honey, I'm home," and not having dinner on the table. Which, can I just say, what a brilliant way to soften the blow of the men coming together like, no, we can't have this change anymore. This is all wrong. By putting a scene just before it that is maybe one of the funniest scenes in any movie I've seen in a long time, which is William H. Macy's just glorious portrayal of a sitcom dad from the 50s doing the "honey, I'm home," and there being nothing, and then a clap of lightning, and then him just wandering around the house going, but my dinner. He stumbles into the bowling alley, and all the guys are like, "Oh, gee, what's wrong?" And he's like, "I got home like normal. I put my bag down. I said, honey, I'm home, but she wasn't home, and there was no dinner." And they're all like, I mean, if you want to make me not like furious that they're now gonna rail against the change in the town, amuse me that much first, because fuck me, that scene. Honestly, give William H. Macy all the Oscars for that performance, because it is a thing of beauty, start to finish. That entire sequence, it's so good. But the movie's main thrust is about how people often will resist change out of either fear of change, which was best represented back in the day whenever they adjusted the visual style of Facebook. and the absolute vitriol that people will be spitting at Facebook, and I'd be like, you'll be used to it in a week. That's a microcosm of what happens socially on a large scale over decades. Something changes. I'm like, it's scary and I don't like it. And then over time, they just accept it because it doesn't actually affect them. But the other side of it, which is the actual people who benefit from the current system of oppression, that don't want to see that change. And in Pleasantville, it's the fathers and husbands that don't want to see their daughters getting ideas above their station. They don't want to see their wives choosing to not make them dinner because they didn't feel like it, or had some other plans, or had freedom. And this is why this is an interesting look at sort of second wave feminism, because of course when this is post suffrage, they have rights, they can vote at this stage. But that hasn't fixed the actual problem. They're still second-class citizens in their freedoms socially. And that's why this movie's so clever as well, placing it in that sweet spot in the 50s, because it allows us to look at that. So, I think the way that this movie sells me on this group of men turning on change that up until that point we've only seen yield good things for these people. It's powerful, and it does make you angry, and you do feel that anger, and it's very effective, lampooning almost the ideology that leads you to not wanting change, because the reality is that nothing that they're talking about is a massive impact on them. You can make a TV dinner. You are capable of making food. He goes to the bowling alley. They sell nachos and hot dogs at the bowling alley, I'm sure. Get a fucking hot dog. Go to the supermarket and buy a fucking apple. You're not gonna starve, you fucking psycho. So the movie's really good, I think, at making that point and landing it. And I do think it sometimes might get muddled because some people think the movie is about specifically sin and people doing bad things and being allowed to do bad things. But I think that is fundamentally misunderstanding what the movie is. The movie is about how people should be free to express themselves in whatever way they see fit, regardless of your personal morality. Because you might think that someone who is of age having sex but still being quite young, that's before marriage, for example, is a despicable thing. But the reality is that's not illegal. That's not that's between consenting adults. That's fine. If someone is as we said, two young people who are 18 or above, you might think that is too promiscuous, too young. That might be your opinion, but it doesn't change that they're allowed. Do you know what I mean?
No, and I think Maguire's Toby, I can't remember the character's name now, but Toby's last monologue in the Bud, that's it. Bud's last monologue in the courtroom has to do a lot of heavy lifting to that, because I completely agree with you about what the movie's about.
You've actually hit on a big criticism I'm going to come to, which is his speech. But yeah, I think you're getting maybe to the same point, so I'll let you go.
Well, I might be, because I'm going back to a point you just made. To be fair to some degree to the people that think the movie's about sin, I mean, when the movie puts a clear pin in someone eating an apple, for example, or trees on fire, yes, there is a lot of religious imagery put into the movie, and I agree with you. I think that's to service the wider point of people look at these things as sin, but actually, it's not the case, sort of thing, or the movie's doing it to make that point. But I can absolutely see the read of someone seeing that and going, oh well, this is about sin as a subject, and I think like we said in the non-spoiler review, I understand its ambition, I really do, but they have tried to do so much under this overall thematic umbrella that, especially in a modern context viewing, yes, where you're just allowed if there's a controversial subject, you have to be either you have to be for or against, you have to be one side or the other. People have probably, regular listeners of this podcast have probably heard me say it 1,000 times. I genuinely think one of the big problems these days is that there's no room for nuance, and so, especially where you've got people there are certain people, in a modern world that would watch this movie and just the faintest whiff of the theme being about feminism or the ideas being about feminism or racism, that they will go, oh well, this movie is about racism, or this movie is about feminism. And hey, this movie's probably gonna not make them change their minds about whatever their chosen subject is, but my point being, again, I guess it's just the same point we've already made in the spoiler review, but so much fits under this one thematic umbrella that you can understand, especially someone from a modern audience watching it and zeroing in on one of those topics in particular.
Yeah, and I think the idea that so one of the first things that makes change in the town is sex, and that is probably a sensible starting point for change in terms of the situation. It's two teenagers coming to this idyllic 50s where everything is quote unquote pleasant. How do they fuck it up? Well, that'd be my first guess for how they might make change, but I do think it somewhat muddies the water and sort of puts a focus on one thing really early that might also lean to sort of leading people down a certain path of way of thinking about it.
I do, because watching the movie, I was sort of sat there kind of thinking, oh, it's a shame more's not influencing this, and I would have thought more would. And when the movie then gets to a point where it's about art influencing and stories and books, the books getting filled in, and Toby's character Bud starts influencing things more as well. Like, I enjoyed that a lot more than how much they focused on sex at the beginning. I think they probably should have introduced other things impacting the world a bit earlier than they did. Like, for a fair chunk of time at first, it's just everyone's randy. Like, everyone's
the change is definitely stemming from a spout of like localized sexual awakenings, for sure. That is the crux for change. And I like you think that what might have helped was maybe doing some other versions of change that the movie does do later alongside that earlier on, just to sort of set us up for, just to unmuddy the water as to what this is about, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, and I think you just introduce some of Bud's changes a bit earlier, or you've got things, the food, like, they're trying to feed her all these animal I don't want to add another theme to a movie that arguably is trying to do too much, but you have her refuse the meat or something like that, in the breakfast scene or something like that. I think there are definitely, well, the movie expertly does it later on with art and literature and all of those sorts of things. So you just introduce it a bit earlier.
Yeah, I think we could have had Bud. Oh, that's never going to sound right. I think the character's actually called David, but he's playing Bud, so they call him Bud the whole movie, which is a name that does not sound right coming off a British tongue.
Well, technically the character, I suppose, is David then. So
David. We'll call him David.
Or just call him Toby.
Good old Tobin Maguire. Yeah. Okay. So Spidey arrives in the school. I think we could have done literature really early. But I think the problem is I can see the balance that the writer is struggling with here, because the problem is Tobey Maguire's character, his arc, David's arc, is that of a person who is of the opinion that things shouldn't change. And he's yearning for a past. And when he arrives in that mystical, magical past where things were good, not necessarily great, but he perceived them to be good and right and happy, rather than the sort of messy real world he lives in. When he first arrives there, his character arc is that he's desperately fighting, bringing any kind of change to the world. So the reason that his ultimate additions to the world of Pleasantville changing, they can't come until he's starting on that character arc. And for that to work, he has to refuse the call first, so to speak. He has to deny it. He has to run away from it. He has to fight it. So I can see the balance the screenwriter was trying to hit there, because you have Bud making changes too soon, then you might hurt his arc, because we really do. His arc is the best arc. We'll talk about the problems with the arc for our female lead in a little while. I think the character's called Jennifer, but my God, Reese Witherspoon's character it's complicated. We'll talk about it. I've got mixed feelings on that, but his arc is brilliantly done. It's so slowly done. It's well established what his deal is. Everyone else starts getting color. He's still not getting color, and we realize quite quickly sex isn't the source of people breaking free of their sort of shackles. The movie quickly establishes that. There's a whole scene where they literally say that in dialogue. So by the time we get to like him actually like growing and learning, and the moment in which he gets color, because he's finally willing to disturb Pleasantville for something he personally believes in. It's a really powerful moment, and it's thoroughly earned, and you really believe it. I mean, that last line of the movie when he's talking to his mum from the real world, and she says, you know, it's not supposed to be like this, and he just replies, it's not supposed to be anything. Fuck me, is that not the most perfect character arc? Do you know what I mean? Moment like the guy that wanted Pleasantville to stay exactly what it was in this TV show that was a time capsule of a fake thing anyway, because no one's lives were actually that fucking perfect in those time periods. We tend to make TV shows, well, we certainly did, less so these days, I would say, but we tended to tell stories of idealized versions of lives. But no life was actually like, you know, those shows. You know, no one's life was like I Love Lucy. Thank God. That sounds like a nightmarish society to live in. But my point is that he was clinging on to this idea of no change, and then becomes the guy that wants change. It's such a perfect arc, and it's so well executed. And I must admit, if you were telling me, could we unmuddle the ideas a bit by getting to some of his changes to the town sooner, like putting out the fire, bringing books and education to the people, telling them that there's more out there. His work inspiring his boss to pursue paint and art and, you know, things like that. If we do that earlier, does that hurt his arc? And if I'm weighing those two options up, and it is as clean cut as it does hurt his arc, but then you get that, or it doesn't hurt his arc, I think I might keep it the way it is, if I'm being honest. Even though I do wish there was a way to sort of introduce some of those other ideas earlier. But that is kind of my where I think I'd land on it. But I still think that is true fundamentally, that the movie would benefit from finding our way to make that change. Just not that one.
Yeah, I think so. And also I think people can be less finger point. Well, I don't know. Like I sort of indicated earlier, I think anyone that would watch this film would be quite finger pointy at it. Would be finger pointy at it regardless, just because of its, you know, potentially they would be people adverse to change, and the movie is very much on the side of change.
It'd be funny to see, because I do feel like you'd be sort of telling on yourself, wouldn't you? You'd be kind of, and it's funny because the movie, like at the beginning, it's so fun watching the people live these weird little lives they live. You do almost want it undisturbed for a bit, like when the movie starts, because it's you're having a good time sort of exploring how strange these lives are. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a weird thing that as it changes, you almost lose one of the best sources of humor from the movie, if that makes sense.
It is a concept absolutely ripe for a television remake. Like, it just is, like, you know, a television show that because you could also sort of go backwards. So you could tell the story, have things begin to, you know, you end episode 1 with something turning into color and one of the teenagers looking at it like, But then, you know, stuff starts to get colorized. But then maybe in an episode 5, we zero in on a townsperson that we've seen in the background. and we tell their story, and it's sort of, again, it's the pleasant black and white world, and we see how, quote unquote pleasant, and we see how this unfolds for them. Like, I think, I think it's really high concept, and I think, like we've said multiple times, take a shot. Huh?
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I never thought about it, but give this concept to like Damon Lindelof and bring in the original writer and director Gary Ross and sit them in a room together and make them. Someone just force them to make that happen, because I would like that.
Yeah, and then Lindelof could produce a prequel that's not a prequel, but also a sequel, and also a side story.
Well, I picked Lindelof for his work on The Leftovers, because I feel like I feel like in tone.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I think, like, speaking of, by the way, one thing we didn't mention that when we talked about earlier as well, the movie having found a bunch of sort of rising stars, we didn't even mention fucking Paul Walker in this fucking movie.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's a pretty big one.
See, again, I wish the movie had, because his character is fascinating, and
Yes.
and that's why I think maybe I say about yearning for a TV show, because we don't have the time to delve into the fact that he is part of the core conceit sexual revolution, quote unquote. He's literally the first person in the world, arguably in this world, to have sex.
Yes.
And then, but is also then one of the characters rallying against those changes later, and again, that's one of the. I don't want to keep using the word theme, because actually there's one central theme, but one of the things this film explores, and I thought it was such an effective scene. You have this, and I don't think he's involved in this scene, but again, I think his character represents this notion. I thought one of the most effective scenes was when you had because at one point the town gets divided by people that, and I think they use the term, don't they, pleasant and unpleasant. So obviously those terms are wrong, but to use the terms the movie uses.
Well, later on they use the
pleasant,
very on the nose, no coloureds.
Oh
sign.
God. Yeah.
Which
Very
look, I'm not going to begrudge them that. That was sitting right there. It makes perfect sense in context. You can't, if this is what your movie's about and you've got the excuse to use that language in a way that makes sense in context for this movie, then you've got to take it. But I won't pretend it didn't, I didn't look at that and go, oh God, that's a bit on the nose, isn't it?
yeah, completely. The scene that I thought was so impactful was when you had the quote unquote pleasant members of the town, so the people that are still in black and white.
Yes.
Who their whole thing is they don't like these activities. They want things to go back to the way they were. They don't think, people should be going off and having sex. But they harass the mum character, and they harass her with catcalls and things like, oh, show us what's under that dress, and da-da-da-da-da. And they harass her with the thing that they are, on the surface, rallying against. And I thought that was such a effective demonstration of that idea and what happens, with this topic of fear of change and repression and all of that sort of stuff. I thought that was such an effective demonstration of that, and the horror of that, and the fucked upness of that, and the way you get so angry at that when you see it. And I thought that was really powerful, and in many ways you could have also done that if you'd have had more time with Paul Walker's character. And I'm not saying the movie should have. I think this movie is arguably already trying to do too much. So I'm not saying they should have added that as well, but I think the Paul Walker character as a conceit is fascinating, and unfortunately for the movie, and actually for being able to see Paul Walker more, because he absolutely could have handled that, it's a shame that we didn't get more of that. Because I thought he represented a really interesting idea within this concept and theme.
Yeah, and I've got to say as well, I think before, because we talking about the themes and stuff has been very interesting. I think at some point we should probably move on to actually talking about some of the story points, character arcs, and what have you. But on that point, I do want to say that I think what's amazing about this movie is that there are a bunch of really over on the nose references to, various civil rights movements, the civil rights movement, but also like I said, second wave feminism and many of the things we've mentioned in this podcast throughout the movie, and they're on the nose. Like the no colored sign is the example we just used, and it is so crazy on the nose that it's like you can't even miss it. But what the movie does to sort of make up for the fact that some of its imagery and ideas and iconography is so on the nose is there's a ton of really cool subtle stuff too that the movie doesn't stick a hat and a bell and shine a light on and go look at this. So Chris just pointed out one of the best ones, which is the hypocrisy present in saying that the town should go back to being sexually oppressed while sexually harassing someone. It's kind of incredible, that level of hypocrisy, and it's a great observation. But also, the movie doesn't hang a hat on the fact that when they're passing laws that only really impact the people who have changed, the people who have embraced that new freedom and are quote unquote colored, they're not present for the vote. And I think this happens a lot where lawmakers make rules for people that are not represented in the lawmaker group to bring perspective. The UK has passed a lot of laws in recent times regarding trans rights and trans issues, and you'll be shocked to hear that very rarely are trans people consulted or involved in the processes as they make these decisions. Not just laws, but just like policy decisions about like how these things are medically handled, what the processes are for that, the extra steps that are needlessly added to people's ability to transition, things like that. And of course, trans people are not involved in those decisions. And the movie doesn't say, and we didn't even get to vote on these rules that you've put in place, and that's gross. The movie just shows us the courtroom, and if you're paying attention, you go, oh yeah, no one voting right now is the people affected by this. And that's really, really clever and really well done. And I think the movie gets away with the less subtle stuff because it also embeds a bunch of much subtler stuff that really is well done. And the subtle stuff reinforces the obvious stuff. And I think if you're propping up over references to this sort of ideology with subtler ones, then you really do create a great message for the movie. And I think it does. If you saw this movie and you didn't like it, that's absolutely fine. But one thing I think everyone should be able to agree on, because I think it's almost objectively true, is this movie is brilliant at making you understand what its point is. Whether you agree with that point or not, or whether you're entertained by the movie or not, you cannot walk away with from this movie, I think, like not having any idea what it was about. I think it is so crystal clear.
I think that's an understatement. I think the movie is smacking you round the head with what its point is.
Yeah. I think it's real.
And I could see, and I could see almost. It's a shame. This would almost be a 3-hour, 4-hour podcast if we had someone that didn't like the movie on air as well. Because I can understand that as a criticism. I don't personally think it's a criticism, but I think I would not agree with, but I would understand if someone was to sit here and go, it's smacking you round the head too much. For them, it could be subtler. Don't agree with it personally, but could understand the arguments they would present for that point.
I agree. So let's move on to some of the more like, the stuff we normally talk about on this podcast. I mean, it's very rare that we are so dominated our conversation by the themes of the movie rather than the ideas.
Yeah,
of the
but
movie,
that defines.
We haven't talked about the structure or the character arcs or much. So we need to.
Yeah, but everything, all of those things you've just named are informed by the themes in this
for
case.
Sure.
Like, do you know what I mean?
100%.
That is the movie. Like, that's
Yeah, that is
like
true.
like we've just said. If the movie's going to whack us round the head with it, of course it's going to be the most prominent discussion. And I think sometimes when. I mean, hey, we both love this movie. It's nice that there is something we can discuss, because for me, a lot of the other stuff is great, but it falls in the category of, yeah, that was great.
Well, so I do
else to analyse.
have a list of
But yeah,
potential
no, I know.
of sort of criticisms that I would like to talk about, if that's okay. I made a point of, because I was enjoying it so much, I was like, I need to write down the things I didn't like, because otherwise this podcast will just be a I really enjoyed myself fest. And I know the movie's not perfect. As I was watching it, I understood the movie wasn't perfect. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could feel that. So I made a real conscious effort to figure out what wasn't quite clicking underneath my enjoyment, to sort of like, just so I could like, we could have that. So there's one in particular I'm really excited to ask you about, because one of my favorite things in this movie, Chris, is the love story between Bud's mom, who I think is actually just literally called Mary Sue, which is it's just not a. Oh no, she's not. She's called Betty. The daughter, the other daughter, is called Mary Sue. She's called Betty. Reese Witherspoon becomes Mary Sue, but Betty and Jeff Daniels' character, whose name escapes me, it's Mr. Johnson. Their romance, right, is one of my favorite parts of this movie. Right, just full stop. I love everything about it. I love the idea that prior to change, Jeff Daniels' character yearned for it, even though he didn't understand that. The excitement he feels when he describes having closed his stores slightly differently because he's finally breaking from his routine, realizing how excited he's been every year, looking forward to Christmas because he gets to paint, that him discovering his love of art. But also there's this amazing moment really early in the movie when he goes to talk to Bud and he sees Betty. And there's this long moment, and it's brilliantly done. And then when Betty goes to see him, she loves the art too. And then the two stories come together because then he starts drawing her because he loves her, and she's colourful now, so she's just perfect. Because he always, he says that there's a great line in the movie where he goes like, "I couldn't paint this stuff," and Bud's like, "Of course you could. A bit of practice." He's like, "No, I don't mean that. I mean, I could never see colours like this to inspire my art." And then we have him later being inspired by Betty. It's beautifully done. But, and this is a real but, a part of me wonders, Chris, and I would love for your perspective on this, if the performances are doing a lot more heavy lifting than the screenplay. Now, I'm not sure this is true. I don't know if I feel that way 100% for a reason I already kind of hinted at, but I'll come back to. But part of me thinks they have like 2 scenes together prior to us seeing them on the floor having spent the night together. And I wonder is it just because Jeff Daniels is so good at convincing me how much he loves this woman and this and I should give her a shout out. She's amazing in this movie. Joan Allen, who plays Betty, who is just one of the most incredible. She's one of the standout performances in the movie. Just gives this amazing performance as well that tells me how much these two characters care for each other now they're breaking out of their sort of thing. But is that the only real reason why it works? Like, if I read this script, would I be like, yeah, the love story doesn't function? Because I wondered this a lot watching this movie yesterday. How do you feel about it, Chris?
It's difficult because I think take a shot, I guess, and I'm sorry, but I think it's one of the examples in the movie where, and this is why we've talked about it so much, where the love story is used more to discuss the theme and showcase the themes than it is to discuss a love story between two people. I think it's also a logistics problem. The interesting thing about this world is that, people can't remember certain things. So, for example, the scene where, and it's a bizarre scene, and if you've not seen the movie, hold on to your hats as I describe this scene, because you're going to go, really? Okay. Reese Witherspoon's character, who is essentially, from the mum's point of view, her daughter,
yes,
explains what sex is to the mum.
Can I just say very quickly while we're on that, because I don't think we'll remember to come back to it, I love that scene to death, because the comedic potential of the daughter being forced to explain sex to her mother is fully wrought out in that scene, and as bizarre as it is fucking hilarious top to bottom. Just while we're here,
and
very
also,
quickly, I want to compliment
also,
how funny that scene is.
And Reese Witherspoon's character is not technically her daughter, but I think that's the thing, and that kind of ties in a way to the point here. So you've got an indication from that, because they've got 2 kids. You've got the indication from that maybe to some degree this world is as it exists in that moment. Like, they can't remember the past. They can't remember how the town is only the town. People can't go beyond the town and all that sort of stuff. So I think one of the challenges is when they look at each other, and I agree that scene is incredible. But that scene is incredible because those two actors are so amazing. And when they're looking at each other, it suggests a history. I watch that scene and look at them and go, oh, were these two people in love, but for whatever reason she ended up with William H. Macy? Like, there's seemingly long forbidden passion between these two. Like, it's a love story for the ages. And then, but case in point, the scene I've just described where a mother of two discovers what sex is, it sort of breaks slightly by you going, oh, but that's not the world. They haven't, because, you know, if they had have felt those things, for example, they might have been colorized before then, or maybe it's deeply repressed or whatever.
Well, that's what I wondered. Is it just like they didn't understand it? They didn't know what it was. They felt it, but couldn't put it to words or action.
Yeah,
because they didn't know what to do with the feeling. That was kind of my read. But that's
quite possibly. So. Yeah. So I think as a love story, like you say, as well as a lack of screen time, the love story itself slightly butts up against logistics of the world, and that's especially true of the ending as well. I did not like if it had ended with all three of them sat together on the bench. I'd have been fine with that because I'd have understood that, and there's a notion of. Actually, I quite like
She's got
the
to figure
notion
it
of,
out.
well, this is messy, but they're going to work it out together. Like, and, you know, maybe William H. Macy's character will understand that, you know, he'll go looking for his own equivalent love or something like that. But the weird editing choice to essentially turn William H. Macy's into Jeff Daniels, that was fucking weird. And actually just... They hadn't done anything like that at any other point in the movie, and I did not like that. I was like, this is a strange choice here.
When I talked about third act problems, there are two things in my mind, and that's one of them. There are three things in my mind, and that's one of them.
So I think there are a number of elements of their love story that you can poke at, but I think the reason you poke at them is because fundamentally they focused on the themes and the thing they wanted to talk about with those characters, I think that makes the movie effective, and because of that we get the scene where Jeff Daniels and Seabiscuit paint the mural on the wall outside and fall asleep doing it. So. I assume you're laughing at Seabiscuit.
Oh yeah, I'm laughing at Seabiscuit. Chris, we've established this. I'm a child. I like it. You can't expect me to not laugh. You can't expect me to be an adult when you call Tobey Maguire Seabiscuit.
So I respect that choice. I'm a fan of. I do. I get it. I understand it. And so yes, I think there are holes you can poke in that love story, but those holes are probably help the compliments we've given the movie as a whole.
Right, and I think one thing I came to sort of realize as I was talking about it, when I was sort of setting you up for the question I had, because I was really curious on your thoughts on it. One thing that has occurred to me is that, like, one of the things that I think otherwise helps it work on top of the two performers being great is that because it's not just about his love of the Betty character, it's so tied into him discovering his love of painting as well, that she's his muse. Like, that I think also means that the scenes that are about him discovering painting are also a little bit about him and setting up him falling in love with Betty. Or whatever, discovering his love for Betty, however you want to phrase it. So I think one thing I will say is, even though they don't get a lot of screen time together, the movie is doing legwork for their relationship, even when they're not on screen at the same time, I think. So I think that's one thing that's occurred to me now in review, in talking to you about it, that I'm wondering if maybe that's one of the reasons why I still love that love story and really believe in it. But I'm with you on the ending. And I tell you, there's another problem with the ending, Chris. It's twofold. You hit one issue with that last moment on the bench. It's the editing. Why sort of pan over to her, then pan back, and William H. Macy has become Jeff Daniels. And I think, I guess the premise is that she chose him, I guess. I think that's what they're trying to tell us. The problem is, one, the cut confuses the matter, but also the dialogue. Because what happens is, William H. Macy says, what's going to happen now? And she says, he says, do you know what's going to happen now? And she says, no, I don't. And then it pans back and he's now Jeff Daniels. And he replies, I guess I don't either. But if these scenes had happened at different times, who's he fucking talking to? Who's Jeff Daniels talking to? Because he's not in the same scene with William H. Macy. He didn't hear the question. So what happened here? Am I expected to believe that William H. Macy says to the woman that's about to dump him, do you know what's going to happen now? And she goes, no, I don't. Then ultimately she dumps him, gets with Jeff Daniels, and she says, you know the funny thing he said to me the last day? He said, do you know what's going to happen now? And I replied, no, I don't. And then Jeff Daniels' character went, I guess I don't either. Like, what? How did this even physically come to be? That's I know this is for the people who love this movie, me coming down on this moment will probably seem like sacrilege, but that I think is genuinely bad writing. I think it's needlessly baffling.
Because it almost implies the characters have been like recast in the world of the show. Do you know what I mean?
Honestly,
the actual sitcom.
Nadia came into the room at that point and asked if it was a throuple.
Yeah. But I'd have rathered that. I'd have rathered she was sat on she looked the other way. I probably wouldn't compliment it enough to mention it on here, but if she looks one way, William H. Macy says, I don't know what's about to happen. She looks the other way. Jeff Daniels says, me neither. Like, fine. I'm absolutely fine with that. Like I say, the notion of, this is a bit messy, but hey, we'll ride the wave and we'll deal with it together. Like, great, brilliant. That's fine. Like, I don't know. It's the editing choice they made does not fit with the rest of the movie. It
doesn't. And I think it's like it's ambiguous to the point of frustration rather than ambiguous to like with intent. Because I think ambiguous with intent is like, we're not going to give you the answer to who she ends up with, but you now know that they're going to figure it out together. And I think that is probably what they were going for with the ending we got. It's just not very clear because of the editing and writing choices, because they're not supposed to be in the same moment. That's very strange. But because of the way the editor did it just leaves you feeling like confused. Like, I in that case, like, have her pick. Like, because there's also a world where there's also a world where I could look at that editing and think the implication is she's ditched Macy and gone with Daniels, which could also be what it's implying because of the way it's done. I just, leave it as we'll work it out, please. Oh, it's frustrating because it's not.
But this is the thing. I've just searched on Reddit and someone has asked, and one of the feedback, I haven't obviously got I don't want to read a full-blown paragraph answer because that's bad podcasting, me just being silent for 20 minutes. But upon the looks of it, some of the replies is, it means her choice of who she's going to choose is open-ended. But I personally disagree. Like, they did do enough with, Lloyd and her for me to... I don't know if he's Lloyd. I don't know if that one works. I don't know. Is he Lloyd? I don't think he is. I think Jim Carrey's Lloyd, isn't he? I think he's Harry.
He is Harry. Yeah, that's why for a minute I was like, who's Lloyd? I genuinely went, did William H. Macy play a famous Lloyd that I've forgotten?
They do enough with Will McAvoy and her to make me absolutely believe that they're the love story. Like, for me, this notion of, it's open-ended for who she chooses, it's not a choice, is it? Her choice has been made. She wants our boy Jeff. Like, it's more about William H. Macy finding his own version of that, right. Surely.
But what's frustrating is, if they did want to go for, she's not quite decided yet, because, she thought she wanted... Harry, but instead she's going to go with the lizard. Like, sorry, this is getting confusing now, isn't it? Doc Connors and fucking Harry from Dumb and Dumber. But my point is, if they wanted to do that, make it like, who's she going to choose? Because his speech in the courtroom actually made her feel like maybe she does love him again. This version of it doesn't do that either. So if that's the intent, the way this scene is edited makes that harder to decide that that's the answer. Like that, it's confusing.
But not confusing, but also frustrating, because that interpretation, and I know it isn't necessarily your interpretation, like you're just presenting it as a point here.
Sure.
But that notion of he gave a lovely speech about her, he talked about his feelings for her, and that's potentially going to make her go, oh, well, maybe I should stay with him because, he's got feelings for me. That's what he wants for me. I'm sorry, but that flies in the fucking face of a lot of this movie.
I agree.
And a lot of what what the point is.
100%.
Which is why I'm so firm on, for me, her choice in the movie, in the text of the movie, is clear, and it's Jeff Daniels. Yeah. So yeah,
but I guess my point was that the editing is so bad that if the person who was on Reddit that mentioned that wanted to take
absolutely
the read that was that, I don't even think it successfully does that read either. I don't think it successfully gives us any satisfying version of the ending. I think it gives us a very confused moment that leaves me wondering what the intent was of the author, and I just think that's bad writing, bad editing. It's one of the weakest moments of the whole movie, and it's a real shame because it's literally the last moment of the movie.
Tell me, because well, speaking of then, Dan.
Well, yes.
Tell me your feelings on Reese Witherspoon's character.
I feel like the writer had her as his starting point for the change in the town, because that needs to happen early, right? So we had the idea of a bit of a wild child learning to maybe put some of those ideas away and like better herself, right? Which I guess in theory, right, is with a certain execution could function. You know, if you're careful about it, her being like, you know what, I don't have to go out and party every night. I can spend some time educating myself, getting a bit better. There's a version of this that functions. But because he didn't seem very interested in actually spending a lot of time with her as a character, because let me tell you right now, like, this is Nick Carraway's movie, and by Nick Carraway I mean Tobey Maguire, who played Nick Carraway in The Great Gatsby.
I was going to say, is that his character in The Great Gatsby?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a shame because I was thinking, who did he play in the Tropic Thunder? Because he's got a brief moment in Tropic Thunder, but I think he's playing himself. So I'd have just said Tobey Maguire.
I think he plays himself.
Yeah, but if only he was Elijah Wood after all, because I could have called him Flipper. That would have been good. Anyway. I'm going to call him Flipper anyway. Fuck it. Start naming Elijah Wood movies. So Flipper gets the majority of the scenes in this movie, right? He's the focus, right? His arc gets so much screen time and so much evolution. And while Reese Witherspoon's character gets a fair bit of focus in the first act of the movie, she is largely forgotten after she creates the sexual awakening in the town, bar a couple of scenes where we see her choosing to read instead of get laid. And because she doesn't get enough time, we don't get to give it any nuance. And what we are left with, in my opinion, is a quite regressive character arc that sort of says, hey, if you're a woman that likes sex, stop it and read a book. And I think that's not the intention. Based on the other content in this movie, I feel like Gary Ross is very much pro people, doing what they want to do. And if you're with another person who also enjoys having sex, then, let's all be happy together. I think that is his feeling on the matter. But because he underserves her character so drastically, at least in this finished version of the movie, you are left, I think, with a really, really shit message for her character. Plus, the fucking ending. Oh. Her choice to stay, I understand on paper. Because the idea is the person who didn't see value in Pleasantville ends up staying, and the person who needed to learn to change can go back to the messy real world. And she's, But the logic they use, the way it happens, the speed at which it happens, her decision to stay in Pleasantville, the questions it raises. Tobey Maguire goes back to comfort his mother who's had a bad date or whatever. And all I'm thinking is, well, God, wait till she finds out her daughter's gone forever. Like,
Same here.
Yeah.
Like this is
She
all very
thinks
well
she's
and
having
good.
a bad day
nice
now.
Moment here. Yeah, you're having a nice moment with this child, and that's lovely. But here's the thing:
your daughter's stuck in the TV. She probably won't be coming back.
Yeah.
And I think, like, it is all a victim of one problem, which is focus. We set her up as the dual protagonist of the movie, and we drop her. And the benefit is, Maguire's arc, as I waxed lyrical about earlier, is close to perfect. It's brilliant. You know, I truly love the journey he goes on. From the moment he gets to Pleasantville and is determined to keep it exactly as it is, to becoming the guy that wants change, fights for change, stands up for change, punches someone to protect change. Fucking love that. Yes. But he sucks up all the fucking screen time like a fucking spider-typed vampire, some sort of spider-based vampire, and leaves nothing for Reese Witherspoon's character. And as a result, her arc is a couple of weird scenes where she says something really overt, and they're all really on the nose, and it's literally like, you know, Paul Walker's like, hey, come have sex with me. She's like, no, I'm going to read a book. And then at the end of the movie, she's like, I'm going to stay here because I'm going to get an education in Pleasantville. You know no one will take me in the real world. Lamest excuse I've ever heard for a movie to have the ending it wanted. If you wanted to give me and convince me of Reese Witherspoon staying and choosing to stay in Pleasantville, you need to earn that. And you need to earn that by giving her more screen time. Whether you make the movie a little bit longer, even just a couple of minutes, or you take a little out from somewhere else. And I know the movie's kind of overstuffed as it is, and it's often struggling to balance stuff, but this is the victim of the balance. Reese Witherspoon's character is the victim of the movie's shuffling around to try and balance everything. Something ended up losing out, and it's almost certainly her character. And I again, I really respect Gary Ross, who wrote this movie and directed this movie, and I think he's done a lot of really good work in his time. You know, he did Big. He wrote Big. Wonderful movie, and I believe he wrote and directed the first Hunger Games movie as well, which is a great movie. You know, not my genre. You know, I'm not likely to put that on anytime soon. But it is undeniably a brilliant movie that clearly captured the hearts and minds of many young people in its time. So I'm a fan of this writer, but he dropped the ball on this one. Truthfully, he really did. And I understand why. Again, the movie has too many ideas in it, but the victim is one very specific character, one very specific character arc. And I feel like we could have chipped a little off the other ones to make some space more for her to create a better balance than we got. It's really bad. it's
I don't even know if you like. Yes, obviously, balance is the thing, but I think you could arguably do it with the screen time that you've got with her character, but change some of the contradictory dialogue. For me, what you're talking about is best exemplified in one of her last lines, which is, and I don't like saying this word, but I will repeat the line and say it, which is, "I've done the slut thing, David. Yes. It's really kind of old." Now, I've just looked up the script to check the phrasing of it. Now,
yeah, I've forgotten about that. That's a bad
like
line.
One of the last things she says, and it contradicts the rest of the movie. The rest of the movie is about how, you know, having sex doesn't make you a slut. It doesn't make you, it's not, you know, necessarily wrong, sin, all the rest of it. It's, you know, the Maguire's character's speech and you know, what feels to be the point of the movie is expression and kind of love and, you know, all the rest of it, and how you know, sex symbolizes that. And sex is literally the start of the movie, as we've discussed, almost in our opinion to a slight fault, is focused on sex is the catalyst for this change and the representation of this change. So for her character to be viewing it as a negative thing by the end of the movie, and that's what that line, one of her final lines, That's what her line suggests. To me, contradicts the rest of the movie. Yep. And I just think you could have, that line could easily be, I think it's too on the nose, and so it wouldn't be quite this. Obviously, I'm not literally suggesting this, but point-wise, a line that essentially says, it's great that people are exploring themselves, but I've done that, and what I want to explore now is this side of me, and I feel I can explore this side of me best right here. Yeah. Where I don't have the noise of the rest of the world, or something like that.
Or even just like, I'm not going to stop having sex, but maybe a couple nights a week I'll study. Something that suggests she's looking for balance, not the erasure of the thing she fought to bring to the town almost, the freedom of sexual expression. Because otherwise it just makes her seem like she's become weirdly repressed. Like she's going to be the one putting up a sign saying no colours in a moment. Like, it's weird.
And I think part of it also extends, the main bulk of the movie is, Pleasantville and stereotypes and archetypes, and how they, as Toby says at the end, there is no right, whatever the line is, there is no right or wrong, there is no meant to be, it's this. And I think one of the challenges is in the real world at the beginning, even though some of them aren't overtly pointed at, Gary deals with some stereotypes, and the starting point for these two, their storyline, it is very stereotypical, and we don't loop back to it. And I was surprised as the movie was unfolding that this wasn't going to be a wider theme. But fundamentally, it's two teenagers dealing with daddy issues differently. Their dad is abandoning them and doesn't want to see them, and he has lost himself in a fictional world of television, and she has, become very rebellious and quote unquote promiscuous, right? Those are the stereotypes the movie is giving us, and they don't point a hat on it too much in the movie, you could argue. So I could understand someone fighting that point with, well, not really, because they never really put a hat on that. But that's that's in the text, and I just don't think I think if you're going to put that so overtly in the text at the beginning, you kind of need to loop back round to it more. It's just not very clean, basically, is what I'm saying. I don't know actually if that point does link to the topic we were just discussing.
No, I think it does.
But
I think it does.
Well, maybe... Yeah.
I think as well, one thing that's occurred to me as well is if we're talking about earning some time back, there is another thing I noted down as a criticism that would earn us some time back. Because I am a believer that movies like this shouldn't feel beholden to explain the world too much. The physical, how is this happening? How does this work? Because I just think you'll bog the story down. Let the characters not understand what's happening. It's a magical thing that's happened to help them grow. We'll Groundhog Day it, right? We'll
I know
it'll
what
just
you're gonna say.
It'll just happen. They'll just be there, it'll be confusing, and they'll work it out, and they'll learn, right? But there are a few problems with what the movie actually does, because the movie tries to throw in some light logic to sort of just give it some information. But the problem with giving us some information is that begs for more information. And I feel like when you look at a movie like Groundhog Day, which I think is genuinely as close to a perfect movie as we've probably talked about on this podcast, along with some others, a handful of others we've mentioned, Back to the Future, RoboCop, movies we've talked about that are as close to perfect as you're likely to get. Nothing is, but you know what I mean. Groundhog Day is the gold standard for this because it simply doesn't even touch the idea of explaining it. The main character doesn't understand. You're not going to understand. That's not the point. It's the character stuff. Giving us some information with the magic man that shows up with a magic remote that puts them in there and then occasionally appears on a screen to have a weird, needless conversation with Tobey Maguire about how he shouldn't be doing this, adds more problems to the movie than it solves, number one. But two, creates the extra problem of just at the end, Tobey Maguire's like, oh yeah, if I just point the remote at the TV, I can go home. Did you know that the whole fucking time? Because I think Reese Witherspoon's going to have some fucking words to say about that. At what point did you learn how you get home? Because at the beginning of the movie, you were stuck there. When did that change? But number two, when did you tell your girlfriend and your fake girlfriend and your fake mum that you're not from this world, because there's a bit of a scene missing there, isn't there? Because he says goodbye to them and says, "Oh, the journey's going to be quick," and then literally in front of them pushes the button and vanishes into the television. Did we skip a lot of scenes where they were like, "Sorry, what now?" Yeah, I'm from essentially the real world. You're fictional characters in a TV show that have somehow come to life because a strange old man gave me a magic remote for my TV in my world, which is in the year 1998. And I'm going back there now using that magic remote because that's here in the time. Like, why is any of that in this fucking script? I'm not being funny, but genuinely, why is any of that in this script? You take all of that out, you gain 10, 15 minutes back, give it to fucking Reese Witherspoon's character. Let's fix that problem. What a bizarre choice. Real for a movie I genuinely loved, I was scratching my head every time anything relating to that came up. Sorry, that was a real rant.
Yeah, no. Even something mad like it would have been, arguably it's a bit stereotypical, but they're arguing in front of the telly and there's lightning. Do you know what I mean? And it hits the telly and zaps them in.
Whatever.
Like because you're also you've also one element of that you didn't mention there, which makes it even more confusing, is the actual television show is also changing to the quote unquote real world. So you've got a situation where the magic man is coming on and complaining about storylines changing, and he references Maguire's character says, "Oh, this is the episode where," and he knows like it's changing. So then you're like, right. Okay, but this TV show's been on since the 50s, so if suddenly colour is introduced, is it only changing for people watching the reruns now? Is it changing in the past? Like it's too complicated. Like just get them in the telly.
Look, I'm not being funny. There's a movie you could do with that where that's the premise, where we're just exploring the weird science fiction premise of this, and it's not really a character piece or a piece about social, the social implications. You could do that movie. That movie could be quite interesting. But there's no time for that in this movie. Why are we even raising... No. By even bringing it up at all, you raise 1,001 questions you aren't prepared to answer. It's fucking nuts.
Yeah, because like at the end when the dude's like the magic man, I can't remember the character's name, obviously. No, I can't. Like the magic man is smiling as if this was his plan all along. Like you were rallying against this. You were complaining about this the last time you were on screen, and now you're smiling like job well done. What the fuck are you talking about? Job well. Your whole thing was you loved the show as it was, and you wouldn't want this change. And now you're like, characters have learned something. Good on them.
Like he'd been lying the whole movie. Really weird. Super bizarre. Hurts the movie. Don't care for it. And then my final major criticism that we haven't talked about yet is this one is a real movie magic. How much time are we going to spend sorting this out? But the end of the movie, I'm just going to call him Seabiscuit because I think that's a fun one. Seabiscuit is giving a big old speech, a real big old speech about the changes that are happening in the town, right? And it's leading to a lot of interesting story stuff for the other characters, and he ends up getting his dad to change color, and then they do I think the one they do with the judge is really clever. He's not the judge, the sort of mayor of the town guy that's sort of overseeing these proceedings. They do a really clever thing with him where he doesn't make him change. He just brings out the emotion he's already feeling and makes it bring him color, which is anger. I think that speech and those two things work quite well, and a really good explanation of why those two characters, William H. Macy's character and the sort of mayor of the town, why they change. What I don't care for, and think is kind of lazy, is that in the background his speech makes everyone else just change into color. And you can convince me that speech was good enough to change the two people that we were focusing on. But that speech has no relevance to anyone else in that room, as far as I'm aware. And I had no idea how it worked or why it worked. And I was watching it going, you have not convinced me successfully of that. You've convinced me of a lot, but you've not convinced me of that. So
I completely agree. Because again, it's slightly, and again, all of we love this movie, but I think our our central criticism comes down to it's doing too much, and there are ways in which, as we've already said, we understand that people could apply that criticism thematically, and the movie could not work for them. But I think that's a good example of, to me, the point of the movie was its individual. Reese Witherspoon's character didn't change until she changed personally. Rightly, wrongly, agree with that arc or not, that's what happens. She changes, and then she physically changes. So just the notion of, oh, well, this is what's going on, unless you could interpret it as, well, his words makes everyone else have a bit of an awakening. Like, I understand that, but actually I much prefer the notion that actually it's just going to come out in different ways for everyone, and it's just going to happen on an individual basis. I think that's way more impactful, and obviously you're in a the movie needs an ending, and that gives the movie a very movie ending. I understand that. But yeah, I completely agree. I love what they did with the judge. I love the notion that that's a different way, and actually quite a horrifying, quite a scary way if you think about it, because it does, another theme that the movie isn't actually touching is that you're potentially introducing, Pleasantville has two sides of it. One thing you've also not got is anger and upset and all of that sort of stuff, and violence, arguably. And you're creating that and introducing it to the world. Again, another thing that could be explored in a television show or something. Yeah. But point being, long-winded, rambly way of saying I agree with that that notion that you've presented there.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, look, the movie's got to get to the ending. We want to show that everyone has changed and grown, and that's he's giving a speech, so he inspires the whole town. It is a shorthand that most audiences will just accept without really thinking too deeply about it. If you actually look at what he's saying, it's hard to imagine how what he said that is so specific to the two characters he's inspiring would also inspire everyone else. But fine, look, for the sake of speed and brevity, it's like that is maybe nitpick corner material rather than maybe it's not exactly nitpick corner. Maybe it's like one street over from nitpick corner. Do you know what I mean? It's like it ain't far from nitpick corner. It is a problem. But it's not going to bother anyone, really. Not really. So yeah, the other couple of quick things. These aren't negatives. This isn't just criticism. Just some moments I wanted to talk about. The gag with the double bed is fucking hilarious. We haven't talked about that, but there's this brilliant thing where earlier in it we see that Pleasantville's has a department store or whatever that's selling furniture, and in the window you can see two single beds, and then we come back later and they've been replaced by a double bed, and the town is scandalized. One of my favorite jokes in this movie, or maybe any movie ever, is that the fire department never actually had to put out a fire because the town is so perfect. And then there's an actual fire, and he goes to the fire department and he yells, "Fire!" And they just look at him. He's like, "Fire!" And then he goes, "Cat?" And they'll go, "Oh, cat!" And they jump up and they jump in the fire engine and they go to the tree, and there's not a cat up in the tree. What's going on? And he thrusts the hose into one of the fireman's arms and turns it on. And they're like, "Oh, I always wondered what this did." And then it sprays water on the fire. It is, as close to a perfect joke as you could get. It's so good. It's so good. The movie is full of great moments like that. One of the other ones that I absolutely loved that I noted down was the kids going to that lake is one thing, but a library? Oh,
also
that
great.
Is perfect. That is perfect. Oh, so the movie's full of really brilliant moments that are just very funny, extremely interesting. And that's the thing about this movie, right? Flaws aside, right? And I know it's going to sound like we spent a lot of time pulling at the threads that are the flaws of this movie, but otherwise we'd have just gushed about 100 things that are just overtly and obviously good about this movie, like the acting, the visuals. In fact, we haven't really talked about the visuals. We're running out of time, but the visuals are stunning, right? Every frame of this movie is a fucking beautiful painting brought to life. Well, with the exception of the stuff that's in the real world, but that's, I think, deliberate. I think it is. They make the real world deliberately uninteresting to look at. I think that's like an absolute choice. And even with Tobey Maguire's magic hair. So there's a part of the movie where Tobey Maguire has canonically magical hair because he goes into Pleasantville and he has a 50s haircut when he's in Pleasantville, right? But then he comes back home He gets his 90s hair again. And then he goes into the room where his mother is, and his hair changes again to a completely different haircut. And I was watching it like, the fuck happened? It was all in his like eyes like a second ago, and now it's all nicely brushed to the side. What the fuck happened? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I guess before going to see his mum crying, he went to the barbershop, got a clean cut. I don't know. Spent some time in a mirror, had a shower. I don't know. I have no idea, but it's strange. But anyway, visually, the real world is deeply uninteresting, but my God, is Pleasantville beautiful. Like, truly, truly beautiful.
Yeah, and the scenes where some elements are in color and some elements aren't all look very seamless and could have looked visually shit and arguably broke the whole movie, but they don't. They look fabulous, all of those scenes.
Yeah, no, it's stunning, and the work that and look, I am not going to be able to in the Triv go into the full technical details of how this movie worked, because quite frankly, no one's really talking about it, or at least not in a way that my dumb fucking brain can understand. There was a 30-minute video on YouTube, which I think is from one of the DVDs, of them talking about the cellular like film process that they used to do this, and the guy was talking about how some shots turned out slightly too yellow and some shots turned out slightly too green, and they reprocessed it so they were all slightly too yellow for continuity. Like, it was fascinating, but I did not understand half of what he was saying. So anyone here hoping I'm going to be able to explain the process of the visual effects of this movie, I've got a paragraph that will summarize it, and that is the best you're going to get from me, because truthfully, the more I looked into it, the less I understood it. Like, truly. But we'll come back to that. But yeah, it's great. Looks amazing, beautiful to top to bottom. Anything else I want to talk about? Let me see. No, I think we've covered all of this. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Allegory for conservative Americans responding to cultural changes. Yeah. Civil rights movement. Yeah, sexual revolution of the 60s. Yeah. Second wave feminism. Check. Yeah, we covered it.
Just mad when you list them all. Like, do you know what I mean? Like all of these things dealt with in the Tobey Maguire, Reese Witherspoon 1998 comedy.
Also, there's a little bit of imagery relating to Nazi Germany too. There's like book burning imagery and like stuff like that they've lined up to so good stuff. I will say the scene where they break into the soda burger place and trash it made me really genuinely sad. Like, I was like, I wasn't like movie sad where I was like, I like a fucking robot. Like, yes, this movie is sad. I understand that technically that is the feeling I should be feeling right now. I was legitimately sad. Like, it really bothered me. It upset me. I didn't just understand that's what the movie was communicating. I literally, like, it hit me.
Yeah, it's all very, very effectively done, and like we said, this is probably maybe end on a light, maybe try and think of something lighter to end on. Well, I guess us both recommending it, but it's so upsetting how relevant the movie still is.
Yeah, that's almost the worst part.
And I think that's why scenes like that are so impactful, because you just go, oh, we've not moved on from this, and there are a number of other themes you could use this movie to explore now.
And in some ways, the flaws of the movie lean into, maybe by accident, its themes, because life is messy and the world is messy and nothing is perfect. Everything. If you tried to force the world to be perfect, there'd be a lot of very unhappy people living within it, repressed, locked down, not themselves. And, the reason the world is messy is because of all that glorious variation that we have in ourselves. And the movies almost reflects that by not itself being perfect, but it is as messy as art is. and like, I could sit here and analyze, the storytelling choices and the editing choices and some of the dialogue choices, which we have done because that is sort of our job on this podcast. But the reality, the final thought to keep this, to end on a more positive note is, as a piece of art, it is a wonderful, wonderful expression of a lot of really great ideas, and it will both entertain you and give you a quite tragic thing to think about, in that you'll go, oh yeah, nothing has changed. The more things change, the more things stay the same, sort of thing. But there is an element of joy to the movie too, because it does sort of come out with a very positive feeling of like, those people can continue to fight change, but to quote Doctor Who, it's a coming. Change is a coming. You can't avoid it. It will arrive eventually. You can kick and you can scream, or you can go with the flow. And I think that message and that idea in this movie, that's so laced with important ideas, but also just so fun to watch. Like, just scene to scene, it just bounces through, and it's just deeply entertaining. Like, it's rare that a film can be like a really brilliant piece of art and a very good popcorn movie, like wrapped in one. I feel like usually you end up being more one than the other, and there's so many amazing movies that I would consider like really artful movies that I love to watch, but I wouldn't consider them like, popcorn entertainment watch where I'm gonna laugh and cry and all that stuff, but I'm actually just gonna like be gripped by it. But then this movie just sits there being both, just fucking easily. It's just completely content to walk in both those camps so comfortably, and it's as a result, it's a massive recommend from me. I'm delighted that I got to see it, and I really am glad that it held up. But I'm tinged also with that slight thing of like, I wish this movie was more known, because it deserves to be more known. It's a brilliant piece of cinema, and its lack of sort of status in the world of films is criminal to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Huge recommend. I think it is. It's an important movie. It's got a brilliant cast. Even if you just watch them, even if the sort of political aspect of it doesn't appeal, just seeing a movie with this charming cast and seeing it as an early Maguire Witherspoon movie in particular, I think there's merit to watching it just on that basis alone. Yeah. So, yeah, huge recommend. Really glad it got picked, and really glad I got a chance to watch it. And now we shall, as always, triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. And I would add as well, a little bit of if you're the sort of person who's sad about, Paul Walker and his untimely passing, and you've not seen Pleasantville, there's not a massive amount, but there's a little bit of bonus Paul Walker for your money, for your ticket price, for your ticket fee. Let's try it. Now, I don't have a huge amount of information about this movie in its process, but I mean, this is partly because it's not very much talked about, but also because this is like a very auteur-driven movie, right? This is Gary Ross, who was coming off success with Big and a few other projects, like getting the opportunity to write and direct a movie of his own. He went through New Line Cinema, which not an indie production company by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely a smaller scale, one of the big boys. They gave him some money to make essentially an art housey film. Like, it wasn't ever intended really to be this massive blockbuster. They did give him a crazy budget, in my opinion. I'm glad he had it, because the movie obviously needed it to look as good as it did. But it was a $60 million budget, which I think is a lot for a movie like this, because I could look at this movie and understand that it probably doesn't have a very wide audience. So $60 million is a lot of money from a business perspective. But there's no stories about rewrites and different directors that were considered and all that stuff. It's very much driven by Gary Ross. Equally, there's no information about casting, who was also potentially up for roles. I have one alternate casting piece of information, which is Melissa Joan Hart reportedly turned down the role of Jennifer, the Reese Witherspoon part. She'd have been good. I'll be honest with you. I think Melissa Joan Hart's a reasonably good comedic actress, but every time I've seen her sort of do drama, I think she struggled a bit more. It sounds really mean. I hate saying that, because it's really, really it feels like a personal, like I'm saying she's not good at her job, which sounds horrible. But she is a brilliant comedic actress. She was wonderful in Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but I don't think she's a particularly good dramatic actress, if I'm being honest. And I'm glad we got Reese Witherspoon, who, for all her online criticisms that she often gets, I do think is quite talented, and I think she's brilliant in this film. So I think it worked out for the best. I don't know. Do you have any feelings on the Melissa Joan Hart possibility? Would that have interested you?
Yeah, I think she could have absolutely done it, but I think Reese Witherspoon. Yeah, I would choose Reese Witherspoon. I wouldn't necessarily even portal gun to that world because I think the script makes the arc of that character difficult enough. I think in the hands, not saying Melissa Joan Hart is a lesser actor by any means, but in the hands of someone that isn't Reese Witherspoon, I think the movie could fall apart if you haven't got the right actress. So Reese Witherspoon's ability to play both sides of that character brilliantly, you need that. So I'm glad it was Reese Witherspoon, regardless of who any other choices might have been and how they might have been.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I'm just pleased it was Reese Witherspoon's.
Yeah, I've got to say though, there isn't a bad performance in this movie. Like any actor that's in this movie nails it. Like even down to like smaller roles, like Jane Kaczmarek, who most people would know as the mom from Malcolm in the Middle. She's done a lot of other work, and she's a wonderful actress. But she plays the real world mom in this movie. So she's only in the opening of the movie and the closing of the movie. But she actually has, even though she's only in 2 scenes, she gets a lot to do because she has to have a big sort of breakdown in her last scene. She's wonderful too. You know, the whole catalyst for Tobey Maguire's like getting to do his final big confident speech is her being upset and him wanting to comfort her. So, you know, there isn't an actor in this movie that isn't a piece to that puzzle and doesn't deliver what exactly they need to do a great job. And, you know, I don't think there's an easy role in this movie. I don't think anyone got an easy ride in this film. I think everyone's got a surprising amount of depth to convey, and you know, they all found their ways to doing it through different means, obviously. But I think it's brilliant. I think it's genuinely, from a casting perspective, I don't know if this is Gary Ross and just knowing who was right for the parts he wrote, or if there was just a really, really talented casting director on the movie. But my God, did they nail the casting? Funnily enough, on a note of casting, did you know? And this actually, this I think came out like this week or last week. Jenna Fisher talked about this movie on Office Ladies. Jenna Fisher, Pam from The Office.
Oh, nice.
She's in this movie, sort of. She's an extra. She's in multiple scenes in the background. She posted a picture of herself on the set in the outfit on social media, and she talked about it on the Office Ladies podcast. I think that's really fun. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, a little bit of fun trivia for you. Now, in terms of the production stuff, let's get through some of this. Unfortunately, because no one seems to be talking about this movie, there's not a lot of really fun like on-set stories, but I'll give you some stuff that I did pick up that I thought was mildly interesting. So production took place from March 1st to July the 2nd, 1997, mostly in LA. This was the first time that they created a feature film by scanning and digitizing recorded film footage for the purpose of removing color. For those who don't know, they didn't shoot the movie in black and white and add the color later. They shot the movie in color and removed color where it needed to be. But this meant over 163,000 frames of 35mm footage had to be digitally scanned in and then adjusted and contrasted. Dozens of different artists and companies that were bringing very particular equipment were brought together to make this happen, including Cinesight, the Spirit Data Scene, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, 2K Revolution, and Megadeth color correction systems from Pandora International were all responsible for making this possible. Now, look, I'm not going to pretend to understand how this works, because as I've already expressed, I genuinely don't. But I will say that everyone involved did a spectacular job, and it looks amazing. And I do think it's really interesting that they shot it in color. Yeah, that's the main point, isn't it?
That is interesting, but beyond that, the technical elements are fly above my head.
Yeah, mine too, unfortunately. I did try to make sense of it so I could explain it to listeners who might be interested, but the problem is it's so complicated that to truly explain it, it's like it's either a 20-minute documentary or like a fucking thesis. So I definitely don't have the time in the context of this podcast to summarize that, unfortunately, because that's how complicated the process was. But credit to them for doing it. The only sequence in which they had to do something a bit different were the sequences in which Bud applies the grey makeup to his mother, which, by the way, can I just say again, for a metaphor for this movie and the characters and their progression, having Bud help his mother hide who she's becoming because she's ashamed because of social expectations, and he's still trying to hold the pieces of the Pleasantville he remembers together. that midpoint for the movie where both those characters are in the sort of middle of their arc, so they've not quite learned the lesson they need to learn yet and are still making those bad decisions, is just wonderful. And it's such a sweet scene. It's really well shot. There's a lot of affection between the two, even though she's not really his mother. But it's just it's a wonderful, wonderful scene. But the way they had to do it was super interesting to me. The way they did it was the color makeup was green. So they painted green onto her and then used digital effects to give that real color. Like they used the green tones the way you would with a green screen. It sort of created a mask for applying desaturation rather than replacing the area with the image. So, like, yeah. So the color of the makeup was green when it went on, and it was green when it was removed too. So she was in the soda shop when she takes some off. She was in full grayscale makeup. So yeah. So well, actually, sorry, no. She's in full grayscale, but means she's wearing full green makeup that is then removed by Jeff Daniels. So in that scene, and credit to Jeff Daniels, she walks in with her face painted entirely green. And they do most of the scene with her face painted entirely green, and then he starts to rub it off, revealing her real skin tone.
Fair play. That's done very well.
It is done very well, I agree. It's complicated, and I still don't fully understand it, because I don't understand any of the stuff that they did in this movie, technically speaking, but it is glorious. Funny thing about this movie, though, because of the number of visual effects shots... I've lost my place in the trivia, so I can't reference the actual information, and I want to. Here we go, yeah. So because every scene in this movie had to be digitally altered in some way, because of the black and white characters and colour, technically speaking, this film held the record for the most digital effect shots of any film when it was released. It lost that title just 1 year later to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So it only held the title for a year.
Wow.
But it had it for a year.
That is mad.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, digital effects shots.
Play.
Yeah, I guess it's the infancy of digital effects, but my God, that is crazy. Now, the backlot street where Buddy and Mary Sue's house stands is located at the Warner Brothers Ranch Studio in Burbank, which is in California. The main house was a facade built for this movie specifically, but directly across the street is a house that's been used in many TV shows and movies over the years, but it is most iconically remembered as Murtaugh's house from the Lethal Weapon movie. So, Murtaugh is across the street, sat on a toilet with a bomb, saying he's too old for this shit. So, there we go. We've reviewed that movie, nice. Right? I think we have.
Have we?
I think we've done Lethal Weapon on here.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny, though, that we've gotten to the point now where we need to start doing new rewind reviews, because I've forgotten...
Well, I think didn't you once suggest a movie that we'd already done?
Yeah, that happened for sure. It was Die Hard 2 or something. Yeah, we'd already done it.
Yes, it was a sequel, to be fair. So,
but there you go. Episode 82, Lethal Weapon. It wasn't even that long ago, Chris. 2023, December 2023, though, and I've already forgotten and would like to watch that movie again because I don't remember it. That's very funny.
Well, pick Lethal Weapon 2, I guess.
Yeah, true. But Margaret's house, which is Margaret's, I think, his girlfriend. Is that right? I think that's Seabiscuit's girlfriend. Nadia's bringing me tea. Excellent, thank you, Nadia. That house is actually another famous house. It was used as the residence of Mrs. Kravitz in Bewitched in 1964 and the Partridge Family's home in the 1970s. So that set actually was from 60s and 70s sort of television material. So that's quite fun. The moment when Jennifer tries to use the bathroom and there aren't any toilets isn't just a joke about the fact that you never see people go to the toilet in those sorts of sitcoms. It's actually a specific reference to an old FCC ruling in the 50s, which stated that toilets, or any reference to toilets, such as the sound of flushing, could not be presented in television or movies. This continued into the late 70s on television, that rule. But the barrier for movies fell much earlier in the 60s because Alfred Hitchcock persuaded film censors to allow the flushing of a toilet for Psycho's sort of iconic shower scene. So that's a joke about the fact you weren't allowed to depict a toilet on television during that period of time. That's hilarious to me.
Which seems mad. I didn't even know that was a rule for a period of time. That's wild.
Mad. Absolutely crazy. Couldn't even hear the sound of a toilet flushing on TV. Madness. Talk about repression. Now, oh yeah, this one's interesting. So there are a few cinematic homages in the movie. Gary Ross has referenced a few. The scene of T.J. Walsh's character, that's the sort of town mayor, whatever he is, in the bowling alley, you know, giving his speech with the scorecards, sort of is a direct sort of play on Patton's speech from, you know, in front of the American flag from Patton in 1970. The courtroom having the segregated black and white characters in what, you know, downstairs, and the coloured characters upstairs recalls Kill a Mockingbird from 1962. But there is one that people thought they understood to be a reference that is not, according to Gary Ross, or at least not a deliberate one. A lot of people believed the scene of Bud raising his arms up in triumph during the rainstorm was a little homage to The Shawshank Redemption from 1994. But director Gary Ross was under the impression when he shot it that it was an original idea and didn't realise the connection until well after the film released and someone pointed it out. I buy that, though. Parallel thinking is a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with, like, there's so much. Like, I can't remember what I was watching, but there was a joke on a show the other day that I watched, and I just thought it was so funny. And I had the thought of, I could easily, you know, 5, 10, 15 years or even 2 months think of that joke and not know where it came from, and easily, like, duplicate it or say
sure.
Like, it just happens. And there was something I was watching, and it was exactly. Oh, that was what I thought of it. There was a joke. I'm pretty sure this is right. Yeah, Stephen Colbert. This is a tangent. Apologies. Colbert did the same helium gag that they did on the first episode. I don't know if you noticed this.
Yes, I did.
That they did on the first episode of SNL UK.
Yeah.
And I was sat there going, people might go, oh, you've nicked that. But actually, it's so logical that the mind would just go to the same joke. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think the person that wrote that was actively ripping off SNL UK. Mate, I think they just both landed on the same joke. That was it. That was the scenario.
I'll be honest with you, mate. We've done it. Well, I've done it by accident in one of our web series. I don't know if we've talked about this, I think, in the past. But there was an old Ricky Gervais bit that got stuck in my brain. And when Chris and I were sort of improving our way through ideas for the script for A Liquid Lunch, like almost verbatim, a chunk of that was clearly in my brain somewhere, and we ended up basically putting it in our web series without realizing we'd nicked it. Which is, and I remember I never figured it out until someone commented on the YouTube video and said, "Oh, I was enjoying this," until you verbatim stole a bit from Ricky Gervais's podcast. And I was like, "Did we?" And then I had to watch it to remember what it was. And then when it came up, I was like, "Oh, we did. We definitely did." It happens,
absolutely an accident. So yeah, it happens. Yeah, for sure,
100%. Now, this is one of my favourite details from the movie. The Native American test pattern behind the sort of magic man that gives them the remote changes his expression across the movie. So he's no expression when we first see him. Then he looks angry the second time we see him. And then he looks sad by the end of the movie. Because too much change has come to Pleasantville.
Oh, wow.
So that was really fun.
Yeah, that's a good detail.
Yeah. Now, the film is dedicated to 3 people. We're going to have to talk about one of these a little bit. So, one of them is Gary Ross's mother, who passed away, I guess, during production, before the movie came out. I'm not sure exactly when. The other one is actor T.J. Walsh, who played the sort of mayor of the town, the slash judge slash guy who's leading all of the negativity towards the people who have gained colour. Sadly, he died after production, but before release. So T.J. Walsh also has the movie dedicated to him. He's great in this movie, and it's very sad that he died. tragic. I'm glad the movie got dedicated to him. The final one is an interesting situation. So, camera assistant Brent Lon Hirschman arguably died because of this film.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to talk about this, so I'll cover it the best I can. He did a 19-hour work day on the set of this film.
Christ.
And then got into a car crash on the way home. Presumably because he was exhausted and not in his right mind. Now, this did result in a wrongful death suit aimed at New Line Cinema, New Line Productions, and Juno Pix Inc. Basically said they were responsible for his death due to the lengthy work hours on set. The crew actually launched a petition for what they called Brent's Rule, which would limit work days to a maximum of 14 hours, but this was actually unsuccessful. I can't actually see here. I'm guessing the wrongful death suit was successful because it doesn't say that it wasn't. So I'm going to assume that went through and New Line had to pay out, which is absolutely correct. Now, I'm not going to put this at the feet of anyone specific. These things are systemic, and movie sets have gotten safer over time, and I'm sure there are rules in place now about, hours a person can work. Having done 16, 17-hour days myself at a previous job, I can attest to what that does to your brain. I can attest to the absolute mush your brain will be afterwards. And the idea, I was very lucky I worked in London. I could get the tube home, but the idea of driving home after doing a day like that, and mine was shorter and probably less intense, I can't imagine where his mind was, and absolutely think a lawful, a wrongful death suit was warranted here. And I am happy to say that my understanding is that working hours are certainly much more bearable in the film industry these days and are a lot more organised. Now, poor visual effects houses, less so, and that's still something that needs to be worked out because the burnout going on for the people that do either animated movies or visual effects is just getting absurd, absolutely absurd. The crunch they put those guys under is also killing them. So still work to be done, but it's improved in terms of on-set stuff. So yeah, very sad. Happened a long time ago, but thoughts with Brent Lon Hirschman's family, because that fucking sucks.
Yeah, that's horrific.
Mm-hmm. So, the jukebox, to go back to normal trivia, the jukebox in Mr. Johnson's malt shop is a 1952 Seeburg M100C. And if you're thinking, Dan, why the fuck are you telling me what kind of jukebox it was? Well, this is known in collector's circles as the Happy Days jukebox. It is the exact model of jukebox that
Sunday,
prominently
Monday,
appeared
Happy Days.
exactly in Happy Days. So yes, it would be in the same jukebox that the Fonz used to bash on, and then went hey, and then the song played. That was a dumb show. Anyway. Bud brings Mr. Johnson an art book from the library titled The World of Art by an author named Edward Bizzle. This book is a prop made for the movie. The author is fictional. The book doesn't exist. It is full of obviously real famous artworks, but the actual collection in the book just is fictitious. Now, interestingly, because Picasso was still alive in 1958, in the book, they very cleverly made sure that the details were correct. And it says Pablo Picasso, 1881-2, and then it's blank. Because he's not dead yet.
Oh, nice.
I always get weirded out with Picasso's, that his death date. Like he lived until 73. I was trying to think of like music from like that era that Pablo Picasso could have listened to. You know what I mean? Like hair metal, like 1973. Obviously, music. Like just no. I know it's a bit of a tangent, but like the idea that he lived long enough to like have heard. I'm trying to think of a band from that time now. My brain is dying.
Well, hold on. Oh no, they were 75. Led Zeppelin, presumably?
Yeah, there you go. Fucking Led Zeppelin. Perfect. Yeah. Pablo Picasso lived long enough to hear Led Zeppelin, Chris. And Van Halen. And Twisted Sister.
Yeah, that is bad.
The fuck is happening? How is that real?
That is brilliant.
Every time I think about that. Yeah, I never. That never doesn't break my brain every time I think about that. But yeah, he was not dead in the 50s, so yeah, that's why he's not got a death date in the World of Art book. Now, we're going to quickly do my new favorite segment of I Can't Believe It's Trivia, because the trivia section on the Pleasantville page is so desperate for trivia. They just start listing groups of people from this movie, actors from this movie that then worked together again at different times. So, very quickly, Joan Allen and Tobey Maguire appeared in The Ice Storm. I Can't Believe It's Trivia. William H. Macy and Joan Allen then worked on a movie called Searching for Bobby Fischer and another movie called Room. I Can't Believe It's Trivia. And William H. Macy worked with Kristen Rudrud in a movie called in a movie you'll know as Fargo from 1996. And Tobey Maguire, Marissa Ribisi, and Jenny Lewis all starred in the movie Don's Plum in 2001. Now, I can't believe it's not trivia, or I can't believe it's trivia. I don't know why just telling me that actors have worked with other actors is considered trivia, but that's where we are. So, very quickly, box office. Look, it's not going to surprise you. The movie was a flop. They spent $60 million making this movie, and it made $49 million. So that is big ouch. No one made money here, at least initially. I'd like to think it's probably at least broken even, if not made a little money since, because of, DVD sales and streaming and things like that. Movies end up making profit over time. Pretty much all of them do eventually. Unless they're like a massive, multi-million-dollar flop, like a, John Carter of Mars situation where you spend $400 million and make five quid. That sort of movie doesn't ever make its money back. But this, look, it was $10 million off making its budget back. I can believe it made its budget back, and then maybe its marketing back through DVD since. So it's probably at least broken even. But fuck me, that's bad. That's. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not great.
That's poor to say the least. And now it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Chris. It's time for Cars Exist.
I took a swig of water as you said it's time, and I was like, oh fuck.
I did think there was a longer pause than usual between me saying it and you doing the noise. You've reminded me I should also drink water though. My throat's starting to... I talked a lot today through my work, and I could feel my voice going. I was like, I better make it through the podcast. I'm nearly there. It's okay. So, when Bud and Mary Sue leave for school, they pass Mr. Simpson. A sleek, low-slung white car can be seen in the neighboring driveway. This is, with the exception of the 1957 Ford Thunderbird, virtually all automobiles of that decade were fat and chunky and clunky in design. The car in the driveway is the only known exception, which is a classic Studebaker, a 1953 Commander V8 Starline Coupe, which is arguably, in the opinion of this trivia writer, the sexiest car of its day.
Beautiful.
Now, I read that as verbatim as I could.
Big fan of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. The styling was such that it was a direct inspiration for the Incredimobile in the Incredibles, a story that is also set in the 50s. So there you go. There's some Cars Exist. So most of the cars in this are sort of, the low-slung, the sort of the Thunderbird style, like normal automobiles of that decade, sort of fat, chunky, and that one car, the Studebaker, is the exception. And as I said, arguably the sexiest car of its day. So there you go. That's all the trivia. We did it. We did it.
I made a sexy car noise, and I think you missed it. I'll do it again for you.
Please. Oh, that's good. Yes. Yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that very much. I'm glad you did it again.
Sorry. Hit the table there with excitement, but yeah.
Oh, actually, we haven't quite finished trivia, Chris, because of course, during the Harry Potter movies, Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses. Got him!
Well, of course.
Just when you got to get you when you're least expecting it.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Well and truly got
him. All right, go on, Chris. Where are we going? That was aggressive.
Well,
that was more aggressive than I meant it to be. Come on, Chris, tell me now.
We had a conversation off mic about how we sort of inadvertently
I was worried. I was worried I'd gotten into your head with this. I regretted it immediately. I shouldn't have said a thing. But go on. Yes.
No, because it's it's a fair point where we essentially have picked like movies that are absolutely, with the exception of the trilogy that we're going to do, we've selected movies that are absolutely within that ballpark for rewind reviews, kind of classic rewind review movies, but when, with the exception of the trilogy, Babe is the most pop culture of the movies you've reviewed, like with sort of forgotten movies. Unfortunately, a lot of movies get forgotten because they're not classics, but even Babe is not necessarily like a go-to. It's not talked about in the same realm as films like Mrs. Doubtfire or The
Goonies,
Mask or
Wizard of Oz,
Forrest Gump,
Grease.
Like,
if you look back at the average season of rewind reviews, like last season we did Elf, not including the trilogy. We did Elf, Miracle on 34th Street, The Wizard of Oz, and The Goonies. The season before, we did fucking Grease and Ghostbusters. And the season before that, not including the thing, we did. Let me have a quick glance. Actually, to be fair, that season we did Speed. Actually, that season. Oh no, Home Alone. Yeah, okay, there you go. That's an absolutely iconic movie. So yeah, we've definitely been this season. When you look at it and you go like, Holes and Babe and Getting Even with Dad and Pleasantville and Kubo, you're like, oh no, we've not done any.
We are.
Yeah,
we've done some great movies though. Kubo and Pleasantville.
Yeah. We've done good. I mean, Holes is good too, and Babe was fun. Like, to be honest, the only movie we've done this year that I outright would say I did not like was Getting Even with Dad. There was plenty to enjoy from every other movie we've done. The problem isn't that they're not good movies. They're perfect movies for this podcast. It's just we haven't done any of the real sort of iconic like films you think of when you sort of think of a podcast doing like nostalgic movies. We haven't hit any of the tent poles this year. You know, the big iconic movies that everyone knows about and has probably seen. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the question is, do I lean into that theme or do I
yes.
Do I choose a deliberately great movie? And look, the trilogy, we've already announced it. It's Spider-Man.
Yep.
I've got the choice before Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I think if there's a point to not lean into the theme, it's that choice. That's the choice to pick something that is sort of renowned and remembered. If there's a choice to lean into the theme, it's this one, and you'll be thrilled to hear, Dan. I am leaning in, because this movie was not renowned at its time. My memory is that it got bad reviews, but we are sticking with the same year, 1998, and it was a movie that I, as a kid, when I watched it, and I watched it because there was an actor in it that I really liked. I really enjoyed this movie, and it was meant to have sequels, and I was gutted the sequels didn't come. And the movie, basically, the choice popped into my head because the IP, I would say, is the right word over franchise. The IP came up on a recent episode of Nothing But Static, and it made me think of the choice. And so I'm. Can
I try and take a guess?
So, yeah, go on, take a guess.
I think it might be. Well, I'll tell you my first thought was Godzilla, but I have a feeling, because I'm thinking of the year, I think this is Matt LeBlanc Lost in Space.
It is. We are going to 1998's Lost in Space.
That's going to be fun.
So it's because when it came up when the IP came up on the podcast, yes. I was just like, it was too irresistible. I was like, oh, that fits the theme of what we've been doing, like too well to not do that movie.
And it came up in such a thin way. I think an actor from a show we just watched, we were like, oh yeah, he's sort of come out of nowhere, but he was very good in this. And I was like, I think he was in Lost in Space. I think that was it. I think that was the only...
but you were referring to the Netflix remake, weren't you? The Netflix
yes, yeah. Oh yeah, he wasn't in the 1998 Lost in Space. Yeah, no, he was in Netflix Lost in Space because it was a child actor, so he was one of the kids in the Man, I've not seen that movie in a long time, but my God, I also enjoyed it as a kid, but I'm very aware of negative reviews. Oh
yeah. And I think also the Triv might be fun because I briefly looked into it, and I think they one of the reasons the latter, not to spoil it, one of the reasons the latter part of the movie gets a lot of criticism is I believe they just like literally ran out of money. So I think it's going to be, regardless of quality, hopefully it will be a fun one. I don't think it will be getting even with Dad. I that's maybe the kiss of death on it, but once the choice came into mind, I was like, oh, I think I have to do Lost in Space now.
Well, I'm glancing at I glanced at the IMDb page, and there's not a lot of trivia. So I'm hoping that there is details about some of this fun stuff because I want to know. And sometimes there's a movie that you just know has an interesting history. Like I think the movie Babe has more like, well, no, because we very much, I really looked into Babe, and it did just seem like actually the reason Babe took so long to produce was just they were waiting. But like, that's a bad example. But like, something like Getting Even with Dad probably has a more interesting history than I was able to dig up, because who the fuck's asking anyone who worked on that movie about it? Do you know what I mean? Like it's you're not getting new stories. No one's doing, like we did Wizard of Oz, right? And there have been tons of books written about Wizard of Oz, like where people have been interviewed and investigative journalists have legitimately like gone and like dug in and found people. Jurassic Park 3 has tons of information about it because there was a guy who did a book about the production because it was so strange. Like, so sometimes there's a movie that you don't think is going to have a lot of information, but it does. Or a movie with has an interesting story, but you can't find any of the information about it because just no one talks about it. So it'll be interesting to see which camp this lies into.
I remember, I have a memory of reading, like, either a newspaper or, like Mum or Dad leave the newspaper lying around, or something like smash hits. I remember reading somewhere that there was meant to be sequels to this movie, and obviously there weren't, and it's very known for being a bomb.
I've got to tell you, the marketing was obnoxious. It was everywhere. The trailer for this movie is ingrained in my brain more than the movie, because the trailer was on the front of every VHS I rented and watched for about 2 years, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're doing that thing where we talk about the movie but yes, we will cover all of that. We will cover our experiences, our memories, and the film. I'm very excited to watch it and see. You know what? Now, see Chris, if it holds up in any way.
I'm almost thinking after Lost in Space, we've each got a choice each before we hit the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, which we're sort of releasing in line with Spider-Man Brand New Day. I've got to tell you, Chris, my temptation now for our last two choices is just to lean into this theme of it's a perfect rewind review movie, but most people will go, huh? They won't remember what it is. I think like we're so close to having a whole series of that. I feel like that, and then we end with the bang that is Spider-Man. But I think I know you were sort of implying that what you might do is choose Lost in Space now, lean into that premise, and then do something a bit bigger for the one before Spider-Man. But I'm sort of tempted with our last two choices after Lost in Space to just keep this going. Let's just keep this gravy train running into the station.
You could look at the choices, and you could be like, someone could point to this series and be like, oh, that really is the series where they gave up on attracting viewers or listeners.
Yeah. Because at least in the season where we did Rent-A-Kid, we also did, I can't remember exactly. I should have checked before I started that sentence. But the season we did Rent-A-Kid, we probably also reviewed, Shaun of the Dead. You know what I mean? Like, it's, or something else oh, yeah, here you go. The season in which we also did Rent-A-Kid, we also reviewed Men in Black and Donnie Darko and Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not quite in Rent-A-Kid territory, but we are close.
Have we? Oh no, is it just there because of Christmas? Right, because on the schedule, the trilogy for next year is very specifically in a specific place, and I didn't know if we were aligning it with something, but actually, is it just there to create a bit of gap between a trilogy?
Yeah, so for listeners who aren't aware, Chris and I have a shared document where we track the podcasts and what episodes, and I've planned out what dates they're released on, and therefore we have to record, and it helps us keep ahead and not falling behind on recordings. And the next year I've earmarked the 3 episodes for the trilogy, because every year the person who goes first has to be the person to do the trilogy. because then we each get an even number of choices. I know that sounds strange, but that is how it genuinely works. Like, because you go first, there's 11 spaces. We each get 4 choices if you then are the first person to do the trilogy. And then because of where Christmas lands in that time period, we had to do the trilogy early. But I looked at this the other day, Chris, and I'm like, I don't even know what trilogy we're going to do. There's a few, but I don't know. Do you want to tackle the Godfather trilogy? Do you want to do that? I don't know if I want to do the Godfather trilogy.
Yeah, but we came up with a load. There's the Godfather.
No, I went through it.
Star
I can give you the full list. I've got it. It's the Mummy trilogy, the Nolan trilogy, the Alien original trilogy before we get to the fourth one, Godfather trilogy, the Evil Dead trilogy, the Hangover trilogy, the Terminator trilogy, the Mad Max trilogy. Man, I don't know about some of these. Blade trilogy, the Tron. There's now a Tron trilogy, Chris. Now because we got a Jared Leto movie this year.
God, I think because we've done the other movies, you have to add the Star Wars sequels and the Hobbit movies as well to that. Because we've done. Oh the other
yeah,
ones.
That's true. Yeah, we got the Star Wars the Star Wars prequel trilogy, and the Hobbit movies. Yeah. I forgot that the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Man, yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that. But there are a lot of choices, but I don't know about any of those, man, because like. The Hangover trilogy just feels like we'd end up watching the same movie 3 times. I'm not feeling that. The Evil Dead trilogy is a problem because the first movie and the second movie are essentially remakes of each other. The Alien trilogy would miss off the fourth one. The Nolan Batman trilogy feels too soon. The Mummy trilogy feels like we should be back pocketing it because there's a new Mummy movie coming with Brendan Fraser in a year and a half. The Blade trilogy maybe could be fun. Tron trilogy ends in a Jared Leto movie, and I just don't want to have to put up with Jared Leto. So I don't know, man. There's a lot here. I don't know what I feel like we should do.
I don't know, because the Hangover I think is interesting because yes, part 2 is a direct rip-off. Part 3 to me is interesting because you can feel the filmmakers trying to avoid that again, but not necessarily achieving it. So I think that's quite fun. The Godfather I've always wanted an excuse to watch, but yeah, watching it maybe that intensely might be a thing.
Feels a bit dense, but we're gonna have we'll have to get to it at some point. It's gonna be on this podcast. I mean, it is one of the most iconic movies, maybe of all time. But I don't know. Look, I know that The Godfather is like a classic that we're all supposed to watch once a year and salute to. But I saw it when I was younger. I liked it. I appreciate it as a piece of cinematic history, but it's not something I regularly go back to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think the Nolan trilogy is too soon either, so that's also a very viable option.
Yeah, and I get with the Nolan trilogy, there's the potential added fun of that I hate the third one, and I know that's not a popular opinion, so that's going to be fun.
Yeah, like there's only 4 years between Batman Begins and the Fellowship of the Ring. So
is that right?
Yeah, so Fellowship is 2001 and Batman Begins is 2005.
Holy shit. God, I wouldn't have predicted that.
So
yeah, I mean, look, it's one of those things where it's I mean, but then again, do you save that for the next time there's a big Batman movie coming out and we do some SEO? Oh, we should be having this conversation on podcast. I've just realised this is still recording.
No, I love the way as well. We're like debating whether the Nolan trilogy is too soon. There's 3 years between the Nolan trilogy and the trilogy we are doing this year. That's it.
Yeah, and also we just did Kubo, and when's Kubo from? 2016.
Yeah, so right, yeah.
Kubo's
yes,
10 years
it would make
after
more
that.
sense.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe
it would make more sense to save Nolan for the Batman Part 2. But anyway, let's this next week. The point is, next week we're doing Lost in Space.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And then next year we'll do the Rush Hour trilogy because there won't be any other good options.
Or we'll go completely rogue and do the Sunset trilogy.
I do love those movies. I don't know how the problem is. I've
never seen them.
The problem is actually, I genuinely think that like the problem here is just that my current mood right now is I just don't want to do anything too dense. I'm not feeling it. But that's like my mood right now. I don't mean like in general in my life right now. I just mean tonight, this exact moment. So, we're not recording these for weeks, so it doesn't matter.
That's the Hangover, baby.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, The Hangover or Rush Hour. I will say Rush Hour has one of my favorite outtakes of all time, which is in the credits. So, you know.
Right. Well, we could cheat the system but do Toy Story 3, 4, and 5.
Will 5 be
Toy
out by
Story
then?
trilogy of I don't know. It's got a trailer, so I assume it's not too far off. Do the trilogy of the trilogy of last Toy Story movies when you thought they were over and they just kept going.
Yeah, that actually could be a fun trilogy to do in the future. I don't mind that idea. Comes out in June. I don't think it'll be out. We'll see. It doesn't matter. Look, this is not a conversation that our listeners should be being subjected to.
No,
and
right.
you know what's crazy? We said, well, we'll try and get this done in 2 hours, and we basically did. It was like 2 hours and a couple minutes, and we were like wrapping up, and I was like, good stuff. And then like this has happened, and now it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes. Sorry, everyone. Look.
To be fair, you could potentially cut this if need be.
But I'm not going to, am I?
Sweet.
I'm just not going to. Look, you can support the podcast in a bunch of ways. If you listen to this on Spotify or iTunes and you're thinking, God, I'd love to hear these two idiots talk about Lost in Space for an hour and a half and then ramble about logistics for the subsequent half an hour, podcast logistics. Boy howdy, do I have a thing for you to do right now, which is go over to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can listen to podcasts 1 week before their sort of wide release on the other podcast platforms for as little as $1 a month. It supports us, helps us keep the lights on, and by that I mean pays the pretty reasonable server fees we have monthly and the website fees and stuff. But we don't have a very big Patreon, so there's only a handful of you on there. We're just sort of hovering between like breaking even and losing money. So if you want to go support us on that, you absolutely can. When Avatar comes back, I'm sure our Patreon will jump up again. So I'm not too worried. Don't do it unless you feel like you really want to. Otherwise, the ways to support us, which are free, which I do recommend, is to interact with the podcast on whichever platform you engage with it. So whatever app or service you use to listen to this podcast, find it, like it, poke it, subscribe, review, star, heart, whatever you can do, you do that. That helps us out. You can also tell a friend. Maybe you've got a friend who fucking loves Babe. And you're thinking, these two idiots reviewed Babe this year. Or someone who that is just the biggest Getting Even with Dad fan. They have a t-shirt that they made themselves, because who the fuck's selling those? They have a poster, that guy.
Maybe
find him.
Or maybe you're playing. Maybe you and a friend want to play the long game, and you're just waiting out for us to tackle the Madagascar trilogy. It's all coming.
Yeah, maybe you really like to move it.
There were 3 of them. I've looked it up.
There are. No, I'm well aware. I've seen the first 2. I've seen the first 2. Never quite made it to the third one for some reason. I think I got burnt enough by the second.
You've not seen Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted?
Nah, no, I'm not. I've seen the first 2.
Presumably. Presumably. I mean, you want like Dan. How many Night at the Museum movies are there?
3? I think 3. It might be 2. It might be 2. No, I think
4.
3. What?
There's 4.
That can't.
There's the fourth one's animated.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's an animated Disney Plus movie.
Honestly, truthfully, I genuinely quite enjoy the Night at the Museum films. The only problem I had was, I think it was the second one. I saw it on a big IMAX screen, and look, Ben Stiller, man, I love you. You're very talented. You're a funny man. You're a good director. But your face was not made to be that large on a screen.
Jesus.
No, but the way they framed it, there's a shot in the movie where his face is the frame, right? And on an IMAX screen, it's just like, poof, it was upsetting. I didn't care for it. It jumped out my fucking skin. The thing is, he's normally he's not a handsome man. He's a handsome man, but that didn't work. That combination of IMAX screen, that framing, and it was a bad choice.
This and we'll make this the last thing, and then we'll get out. But this animated Night at the Museum movie is insane. Like the cast replacements, but they've replaced, obviously, arguably icons with names that are still well known. So Ben Stiller's part is played by Zachary Levi. Robin Williams is by Thomas Lennon. Owen Wilson's is by Steve Zahn. Steve Coogan's is by Jack Whitehall. Ricky Gervais is replaced by Jamie Dimitri. Like, this is mad. Like,
That is a really good cast.
cast.
With the exception of Zachary Levi, who can go fuck himself. That's a pretty good cast.
Well, there we go. Right. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, look, everyone. The main message you have to take away from this week's podcast, if anything, is fuck Zachary Levi.
See, I don't know enough about this, but I mean, I guess we can Google it. We don't need to go into it now. My name's Chris Billigan.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.